Hi, I'm Paul Offord and welcome to my session on dual trace analysis with Wireshark and Workbench. So let's start by looking at the agenda. We're going to discuss why we perhaps want to use dual analysis. We're going to look at the prerequisites, the bits and pieces that we require to do it and how we install those different bits and pieces. And then we're going to move on to actually looking at the way that the dual analysis works with Workbench and two features, one called Matcher and one called Syncro. And then we're going to move on to actually run through a use case. So what do we need to perform dual network trace analysis? Well, you can get situations where perhaps you're tracing on each side of a firewall to look at the performance of that firewall or to look for issues with rule sets, etc. And it's quite difficult to match up the packets on each side. You can do it manually, but it's a very time-consuming process. Also, another common reason is because you want to look at the performance of an internal network. So for example, you might want to understand if you have delays or packet loss across the internal network that may be actually contributing to performance instability issues. And another example is one that my colleagues at Advanced 7 are looking at right now, which is the performance of an application that has a cloud component. So we can trace on the Linux box in the Amazon cloud, and we can trace on the Windows box, which is on-premise. By tracing in those two places, we can see if we have a problem in the infrastructure that connects those two devices or those two processes together. So what do we need? Well, we need Windows 7 or 2008 R2 server or later, and we need Wireshark 2 or later. We then need two pieces from the TribeLab site. We need a Syncro plugin, which is just a small DLL that we use with Wireshark, and we also need Workbench, which is available from the TribeLab site. And we're going to install the software in this order, in the order you see up here. In fact, I'm going to skip obviously the Windows installation, and we'll assume we have Wireshark 2.2 or later as well, but this would be the order I would suggest that you would install the software. So let's look at that installation. So you can see here I have a Windows 10 machine and I have Wireshark installed. So if I fire up Wireshark, you can see that I'm using what is the latest version at the time of recording this, which is 2.4.2, and that's all installed and all works fine. So that's the first step. You can get Wireshark obviously from wireshark.org, download it, get it installed, and you're ready to go with the rest of the installation work. The next thing I need is the plugin. So let's go to the TribeLab site, and we actually need the community site. And you need to have a login on this site. It's totally free of charge. Just create yourself a user profile. You can do that by over here, just do create new accounts, and you can get yourself up and running very quickly. Now all the background information regarding Workbench we'll find in this section here. And then we also have a section that covers Syncro, so we can get some information there. But actually, to get the software, what we need to do is we need to go to Downloads. And the first thing I'm going to do is to install the Syncro plugin. So I scroll down here, and here we go, Syncro. And I want Syncro 2.4.2 because I want it for my 2.4 installation, which actually is 2.4.2 as it happens as well. So let's click on that. You may get a warning like this. We keep that. Okay, so that's ready to use. Now what we do is click on that and say show in folder. So there it is in my downloads folder. I need to copy that and then I need to go back one level to my user directory, and then I need to go into a hidden folder called app data. I need to go to roaming, Wireshark, and I need a new folder called plugins, and then just copy that into there. Now we can check to see if that's worked, because if we now fire up Wireshark, we now get this additional entry up here in the menu, and so you can see that we have Syncro installed. The only thing is it's not enabled right now. So what we do is we go into Edit, Preferences, Protocols, go down to Syncro, just there, and to enable it you have to set a port number that will be used to communicate with the Syncro function. So I always use 8090. You can choose any number you like. And now if we shut that down and start it again, now we can see that we have port 8090 at this point here. Now something, you don't have to do this step, but something I like to do is I like to use this little terminal emulator called Putty, and I use it to test. So let's run that. So it downloads. Show that in the folder. We'll just run that up directly from here for the moment. And we type in localhost port 8090 raw and then open. And you can see that I've immediately connected to Wireshark that's running here. Now it's useful for me to check this with a trace file, so let's open up see if we can grab a trace file very quickly. Find some in here. One in here will do the job. That one there. Okay, so you can see now we have a trace file loaded. Let's increase the magnification a bit so it's clear. And we're at packet number 1. If we flick back into here, it says we're in packet number 1. If I just shrink this, so you can see that as I move through this trace, Syncro is sending details of where we're moving to my little putty screen here. The reason for needing this will become apparent later on, but also I can do things like command tab, go to frame tab 55, misspelt it, command tab, go to frame tab 55, and you can see that this jumped to frame number 55. So the purpose of this is just to show you that we've successfully installed Syncro and it's working as expected. So let's shut this all down and go back to here. Okay, so the next thing we need is Workbench. So that's here. So we download that. So that's it. We now have the installation package. So let's run that. Okay, and close that window. Okay, so we should now have Workbench installed. You can see it's up here, so I'm going to pin that to my taskbar. So I've got it down here. So let's start it and see what we get. Okay, so it's just telling me that if I want to use the online services, and this is the workflow function of Workbench, then I need to have a community account. You should have had one because obviously you've just downloaded the software, so let's say yes to that. I put in my user ID, this is my test ID, and my password. And that should get us going. Maximize that. You can see over here that it's loading up the instances of workflows that I have available. I'm going to close that for the moment because I'm not really interested in that. One thing you notice is that Workbench has automatically detected a number of applications and installed them into the Workbench toolbox. So that's one of the reasons for installing Wireshark first. It will immediately install Wireshark into the Workbench toolbox, which saves some time. We're pretty good to go at that point, so let me just click back to our presentation and I'll cover some more of the background here. So we've completed the installation. Now let's just talk about these two functions called Matcher and Syncro. So Matcher, as the name implies, matches packets between a number of capture points, and we'll see how this works in a second. But the important part here is that you need a match profile, and this defines the criteria that are going to be used to match packets between 2 points in a network. The one I've shown here is the TCP basic match. This will match packets as they cross a network, provided they don't go through source NATing or destination NATing or any of those things. So this is a very basic type of match. Will probably meet most of your needs actually. Then we have the fact that if you specify too few criteria in here, what will happen is you won't get unique matching, and it will Matcher will match multiple packets to other multiple packets. If you specify too many criteria in here or incorrect criteria, then you don't get any matches at all. If you need help with this, just post a question on the Workbench support forum and we'll do our best to help you define an appropriate match profile. So what we're going to see is that once we run a match, it produces something called the match grid. And just to give you an idea, in this case we've matched packets from two different capture points, and we call them CP1 and CP2, capture point 1 and capture point 2. This is the trace file name. I've shrunk the column across a bit to give us a bit more space. This is the trace file name for capture point 1, and here's the file name for capture point 2. You can have multiple files in a capture point. There's no problem with that. Workbench handles that. Then you see the frame number for each frame in the capture point and how they match in the other trace. Now this one's been filtered quite significantly, but what you can see even here is that here frame number 15 matches to frame number 18 over here. So you start to see how Matcher is able to match these things up, even though things have become out of sequence and all sorts of other problems. So that's the matching function. The next thing is, how do we do the synchronization? How do we keep two Wireshark instances in sync with each other? Here you can see a screenshot of one trace running in Wireshark and another trace running in another instance of Wireshark, and these two are linked together through the match grid in Workbench. And so packet number 15, if we start from there, what happens is that as you move to packet number 15, the Syncro plugin in Wireshark sends a message to Workbench and says, look up number 15 for me. It looks across the grid and says that matches to number 18, and then it sends a command to the other instance of Wireshark to tell it to move to frame number 18. So that's how Syncro and Workbench are keeping everything in step, and it all hinges around this match grid. As a demonstration of this dual trace capability, what we're going to do is we're going to look at a problem with the transfer of a large amount of data from a web application that you see on the right hand side of this slide to VDI desktops on the left hand side. So basically we see a request come from the VDI desktop to the web application. The web application delivers a large amount of data back to the VDI desktop, and this is taking a long time. And for this particular analysis we're interested in something which is the round trip time to acknowledge a data packet. So you can see that on the right hand side of the slide we have data that leaves the ESX host heading for the firewall. It comes out of the other side of the firewall heading for the VDI desktop. The desktop acknowledges very quickly within 100 milliseconds, but the acknowledgement doesn't appear back at the web application until 118 milliseconds later. So obviously we have some sort of problem across the firewall. So I've sort of jumped forward here and told you what the result of the analysis is, but I want to give you an outline of what we're trying to achieve here. Now if I show you just how you do that using Workbench and Syncro, I think you'll see the power of this. So the observant ones amongst you will notice that my toolbox is got many more tools in it than I had when I started this presentation. I'm actually recording this the following day, and I'm using my official demo machine to do this part. Everything's there that you had before. Obviously Wireshark is the main thing here, which you saw us install, or you saw installed into the toolbox earlier. Okay, so start the matcher tool like that. We drag the two trace files that we're interested in that have been captured, this one on the Linux web app server, and this one actually on a monitor port on the F5 on the other side of the firewall. So we have those two trace points, and I have the basic match profile that I set up before. I'm going to just slide this away for a second, and then we'll run the match. Okay, so here's our match grid with the matching packets. Now to get the synchronized dual analysis piece, I enable the function called Syncro. If we had more than two capture points, we would be able to select the capture points that we wanted to actually compare in this drop down, but in this case we've only got two, and these are the two we want to compare. So I enable that, and then I just click into one of these packets. So that starts me 2 copies of Wireshark. And I'm using a profile that I specifically set up to look at this RTT to ACK value. So let's just put those across like that. Now what I can do is if I click into this one and I move through it, you can see that the trace at the bottom is also moving in sync with the one above. And this is where it's doing this thing where the top Wireshark up here, the Syncro plugin, is sending a message to Workbench to match up the packets in the match grid, and then it's sending a command out to the second copy of Wireshark to cause it to move to the correct place. And this is really useful because actually in this case you can see is a very good example of why it can be confusing looking at two traces side by side and doing all the matching manually. For one thing, you notice here that I move twice for every movement in the packet in the trace below, And that's because if you look at the TCP length here, we've got 1448, and if you look at the length here, we've got double that value. And this is where we have TCP segmentation offload running on the Linux host. So this is just one of the things that it overcomes, because now we can better understand what's going on. Now you can see these round trip time to ACK values all look quite good actually in both traces. This one's 40 milliseconds slower than the one above, so we do have some delays, but now you see we really hit problems, and this is where the slow packets come in. So I can flick back down into this trace now, and I can move through this one and have the top one follow. And you can see here that I've got a value of 118 milliseconds on the Linux side of the firewall, and yet on the other side I see less than a millisecond. So I hope this just gives you a quick demonstration of what you can do with Wireshark, Workbench and the Syncro plugin. Please post your comments, and I love to get your feedback, and I'll speak to you soon.